The rain poured relentlessly as Emily Preston clutched her weathered leather satchel tightly to her chest, shielding it from the downpour. Her trembling hands gripped a flimsy umbrella, a hasty purchase from a corner store, which flipped inside out with every gust of wind. Her high heels splashed through puddles, water soaking the hem of her skirt as she hurried toward the towering glass skyscraper ahead. The name Dalton Enterprises shimmered above the revolving doors, a beacon of hope and pressure. Emily's heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. This was her chance, perhaps her only chance, after months of unanswered applications and mounting bills. She had skipped meals to afford a second-hand blazer and skirt, slightly oversized but enough to lend her a professional appearance. Stepping into the lobby, she was immediately struck by its grandeur. Marble floors gleamed under the glow of modern chandeliers, and the scent of polished wood mingled with that of expensive coffee. Sharp-dressed professionals moved with purpose, a stark contrast to the cramped apartment she called home. Emily squared her shoulders, refusing to let the opulence intimidate her. Focused on crossing the glossy floor without slipping, she nearly collided with a man. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, exuding an air of authority. His jet-black hair was slightly tousled, and his piercing gray eyes studied her with curiosity and a hint of amusement. A faint smile played on his lips. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. Emily blinked, realizing she had been staring. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm fine," she stammered, awkwardly raising her dripping umbrella. "Just the rain. Good to hear." He stepped aside gracefully, his movements effortless. "You're here for the interviews, aren't you?" She nodded, surprised by his perceptiveness. "Good luck," he said, his smile deepening before he walked toward the elevators. There was something about him that felt familiar, but she had no time to dwell on it. Emily checked in at the reception desk and was directed to the 30th floor. As the elevator ascended, she rehearsed potential answers to interview questions in her mind. Her resume was modest, listing work as a waitress and part-time data clerk, but she was determined to make an impression. This job could change everything. The office on the 30th floor was even more intimidating than the lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the city, and the receptionist, a sharp-looking woman with a sleek bob, directed her to a luxurious waiting area. Other candidates sat nearby, their polished attire radiating confidence. Emily felt small but steeled herself, reminding herself why she was here. When her name was called, her heart raced. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and followed the receptionist into a spacious conference room. Seated at the head of the long table was the man from the lobby, flanked by two other executives. His presence was even more commanding in this formal setting. "Miss Preston, please have a seat," he said, his tone calm yet authoritative. Emily complied, gripping the edge of her chair to steady her nerves. The interview began with standard questions about her background, skills, and availability. As the conversation progressed, Emily noticed the man, who introduced himself as Adrian Dalton, CEO of the company, watching her intently. His questions were probing but fair, his tone thoughtful. "What motivates you, Miss Preston?" Adrian asked, his gaze unwavering. Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "I believe in hard work and resilience. No matter how difficult things get, I want to prove that I can succeed, not just for myself, but for the people who have supported me." Adrian's expression softened, and though he remained silent for a moment, his silence was contemplative rather than dismissive. When he finally spoke, his tone carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. "That's admirable." The remainder of the interview flew by. As Emily stood to leave, Adrian extended his hand. His handshake was firm yet gentle, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was something in his gaze, a spark, a connection, that Emily couldn't quite place. "Thank you for your time," she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Adrian nodded. "We'll be in touch soon." Stepping into the hallway, Emily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The elevator ride down felt surreal, her thoughts swirling with nervous anticipation. Little did she know that the simple act of attending this interview had set into motion events that would change her life forever. High above in the conference room, Adrian remained seated as his colleagues began discussing the candidates. His thoughts, however, lingered on the determined young woman with rain-soaked shoes and fire in her eyes. "She's interesting," he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. The next morning, Emily was jolted awake by a sharp knock on her door. Her tiny studio apartment smelled faintly of instant coffee and damp fabric, a far cry from the polished elegance of Dalton Enterprises. She stumbled to the door, greeted by her landlord's gruff voice. "Rent's late," he barked. Emily swallowed hard. "I just need a little more time, Mr. Carter. I have an interview result coming soon. If I get the job, No promises," he interrupted. "Payment by Friday, or you're out." The door slammed shut before she could respond. Disheartened but not defeated, Emily grabbed her phone, hoping for an email or a call from Dalton Enterprises. There was nothing. Determined not to let despair consume her, she spent the day working her shift at a diner, cleaning tables and serving customers, keeping busy to stave off doubt. By the time she returned home, exhaustion weighed heavily on her. She had barely set her bag down when her phone buzzed. The screen displayed an unfamiliar number. "Hello," she answered, her voice trembling slightly. "Miss Preston, this is Adrian Dalton." His smooth, familiar voice filled the silence, and in that moment, Emily's world shifted. The cold wind swept through Emily as she heard the familiar voice on the phone. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time," Adrian said, his voice warm and gentle. Emily froze, her world narrowing to the sound of his voice. "No, not at all. This is a good time," she replied, her voice trembling. "I wanted to inform you that you've been selected for the position." "Congratulations," Adrian continued. Relief mixed with disbelief washed over Emily. "Thank you, Mr. Dalton. I don't know what to say. You deserve it. And please call me Adrian," he said, his tone warm, laced with a smile. "Be at the office on Monday morning. HR will provide all the details." The call ended, but Emily remained standing, her mind racing. She had done it. This job could be the lifeline she desperately needed. Yet beneath her joy, a strange feeling lingered when she thought of Adrian. She shook her head, reminding herself that he was her boss now, and nothing more. Monday arrived quickly, and Emily was at the office early, anxiety swirling around her. She was greeted by the HR manager, who guided her through her duties. By mid-morning, she was already immersed in schedules, phone calls, and administrative tasks. Adrian remained a distant yet magnetic presence. His glass-enclosed office stood prominently in the center of the floor, and Emily occasionally caught glimpses of him, leading meetings or conversing with executives. Around noon, Adrian unexpectedly stopped by her desk. "How's your first day going?" he asked, his voice warm. Emily straightened in her chair, trying to maintain composure. "Busy, but very good. Thank you again for this opportunity." "I never doubted your potential," he replied. "If you need anything, just let me know." Throughout her first week, Emily threw herself into her work, proving to be efficient and resourceful. She even earned praise from her direct supervisor. Yet, she couldn't ignore Adrian's subtle attention. Though he remained professional, there was an undeniable connection every time their eyes met. On Friday evening, that connection became more apparent. Emily stayed late to finish a report, and Adrian appeared at her desk, his suit jacket draped over one arm. "You work harder than most people here," he said lightly. Emily smiled shyly. "I'm just trying to keep up." Adrian paused, his gaze softening. "You're doing more than that. Would you join me for dinner? I'd like to discuss your progress." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, unsure if this crossed a line. But Adrian quickly added, "Strictly professional, of course." She nodded. "All right. Thank you." That evening, they met at an upscale restaurant near the office. Emily had never been to such a lavish place, and Adrian seemed to notice her awe. "It's just a place," he said, pulling out her chair. "What matters is the company." Their conversation began with work, her goals, ideas for streamlining processes, but it soon turned personal. Adrian spoke about his journey to becoming CEO, the sacrifices, and the loneliness of success. Emily, in turn, opened up about her struggles, her late parents, and the pressure of staying afloat. "I admire your resilience," Adrian said, his voice low. It's rare to meet someone with such drive. Emily felt a warmth spread through her, but she quickly reminded herself of the boundaries. Yet, as the evening wore on, the line between professionalism and something more began to blur. Adrian's gaze lingered. His tone grew more intimate, until a silence settled between them. Emily, he began, his voice hesitant yet resolute. There's something about you that I can't stop thinking about. I've never. She stood abruptly, her heart pounding. I should go. Thank you for dinner. Adrian didn't stop her, but his eyes spoke volumes. As Emily walked away, her emotions were a storm of confusion and longing. The days following their dinner blurred into a strange dance of avoidance and unspoken tension. Emily buried herself in work, determined to prove she deserved her position on merit alone. Adrian, on the other hand, seemed to give her space, though their paths continued to cross. Each encounter carried an unspoken connection, quiet yet undeniable. Despite all challenges, their relationship faced its greatest test just a month later. Dalton Enterprises was in the middle of an important merger, and the pressure was overwhelming. Adrian worked tirelessly, often skipping meals and staying up late to the point of exhaustion. Emily, with all her care, tried her best to support him, but the stress was taking its toll. One evening, while the two were reviewing documents in Adrian's office, he suddenly stood up and swayed. Emily immediately rushed to his side. Adrian, you need to rest, she said, her voice filled with concern. I'm fine, Adrian insisted, though his pale face said otherwise. No, you're not, Emily countered firmly. You're pushing yourself too far. Let me help you. Adrian sighed, his shoulders slumping. I hate feeling weak. You're not weak, Emily said decisively. You're human. Let me take care of you this time. Finally, Adrian allowed Emily to guide him to the couch in his office. She quickly retrieved a blanket from the supply closet, sat beside him, and held his hand as he began to relax. In that quiet moment, Emily realized how deeply she cared for him, not just as a CEO, but as the man she loved. The successful merger brought stability. Adrian, having learned to trust Emily, began delegating more responsibilities, allowing himself to enjoy life outside of work. Gradually, their relationship, though the subject of occasional gossip, became an accepted part of the workplace. On a sunny Saturday morning, Adrian surprised Emily with a planned trip to the countryside. They drove for hours, leaving the city behind until they arrived at a small inn nestled in a peaceful valley. Emily was enchanted by the serene beauty, the air filled with the scent of wildflowers and the sound of birdsong. That evening, as they walked through a golden field bathed in the glow of sunset, Adrian suddenly stopped. He turned to Emily, his eyes a mix of nervousness and determination. There's something I've wanted to say for a long time, he began, gently taking her hands. Emily, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. You've shown me what it means to truly love and be loved. I don't want to spend another day without you. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily held her breath as he opened it, revealing a sparkling diamond ring. Will you marry me? Adrian asked, his voice trembling slightly. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. 1,000 times yes. Adrian slipped the ring on her finger before pulling her into a deep kiss, sealing their unbreakable promise. In that moment, as they held each other tightly, Emily felt a peace and happiness she had never known. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought them to this, a new beginning filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. In the following months, Adrian and Emily planned a cozy, intimate wedding attended by close family and friends. The ceremony took place in the same countryside where Adrian had proposed. The field was adorned with fresh flowers and twinkling lights. As they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Their life together wasn't perfect. There were challenges, arguments, and moments of doubt. But through it all, they remained steadfast, their love becoming a constant anchor in the storms of life. Years later, standing on the rooftop where it all began, Emily looked out over the city and smiled. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. Adrian wrapped his arms around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every day," he replied, his voice warm. "And I wouldn't change a thing." As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Emily realized that her leap of faith into the unknown had led her to a life she never dared to dream of. This wasn't just a love story. It was the story of two people who dared to defy the odds and found true happiness along the way.